Mä olen Teemu ja tämä on Rahoituskierros podcast. Mä otan neuvonantajana startuppeja keräämään rahaa sijoittajilta. Kierroksia mulla on takana kymmeniä, kuten on startupeille kerättyjä miljooniakin. Tekemieni kierrosten kokemuksesta syntyi tämä podi. Rahoituskierros podcast on podi startuppien rahoituskierroksista foundereiden kertomana. Today's episode will be in English, as my guest is IQM Quantum Computers CEO and co-founder Jan Goetz. Welcome to the podcast, Jan.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today.
Let's start as always. Please tell me about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and how did you end up in Finland?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I'm Jan. I'm originally from the western part of Germany, the Cologne region. This is where I grew up and went to school. And already in school, I think I figured out that I'm more a technical person. So I liked physics and math, these kind of things. So I decided to study physics. But I wanted to do it as far away from home as possible, but still in Germany. So I picked Munich, actually, as the city where I would study physics, which I then did. So I moved to Munich in 2006 and did 5 years of physics at the university. And then I was still super fascinated from physics, in particular quantum physics, where I did my focus on. And I decided to do a PhD in the field as well. So I stayed 5 more years in Munich working on my PhD, focusing on electrical chips at very low temperatures. So this was the research field, which later turned out is the base technology for the computers that we are building today. But back then it was really scientific research and we didn't think so much about quantum computing. But when I finished my PhD, it was already clear, this was 2016, it was already clear that quantum computing is becoming a thing. So in the US actually, there were already big funding rounds from companies which are meanwhile stock listed, like Rigetti or INQ. They've been raising already larger rounds in 2015, 16, and Google had announced that they would build their own quantum computers in 2015. But Europe is usually a little bit late to the game in these things, so there were no such companies in Europe. I still love the field a lot, so I decided to continue the scientific career, and I was looking for postdoc positions. And yeah, one of the offers I got was actually from Aalto University, from Mikko Muttonen, the professor there. And I think it was a great offer because it really allowed me to develop myself based on the research that he did and the opportunities that were there, also with VTT and the chip line that they have. So I decided end of 2016 to move to Finland and to do a 2-year postdoc in Finland at Aalto University, which I did. And then I still very much believe that I would become a physics professor at some point. I still give actually physics lectures at Aalto University and I do a lot with the students. But obviously then at some point the story changed and my scientific career came to an end at some point, yes.
So fascinating. Quantum physics is really rocket science.
Yeah, and I'm still very much fascinated by these very deep questions. I mean, quantum physics, it's really about the boundaries of what we as humans, I think, can understand. So there are these concepts of particles being in 2 places at the same time or sharing information over hundreds of kilometers, even though they're very far away from each other. Actually, they know exactly what each others are doing, what we call entanglement, the first effect being at 2 places in the same time we call superposition. So there's very deep science involved, but I think the great thing is that meanwhile actually we are at a point where technology has developed so far where we can use those very fundamental physical effects to build machines out of them. Not only computers as we do, actually you can build sensors, you can build communication tools. In the end, the vision of physicists is that you can build a whole industry based on quantum effects.
Exactly. So, but how did you become an entrepreneur? You were still heading to become a professor in physics. So what changed your mind and what was the opportunity that you had?
It was really not planned at all. It was for myself really a surprise. So when my contract came to an end, so usually these postdoc contracts, they're limited to 2 years. And then you have to find something else elsewhere and you move around until you find a professor position somewhere. So my contract was also coming to an end and I was writing to Mikko, the professor, saying, hey, I'm going to look for some other opportunities. And I wrote him the email in the evening and he still replied that night, just saying, hey, why don't you come to my office in the morning and we talk about this? So I was entering the room thinking that he would tell me, yeah, you can apply here and there, and I know these people and they're looking for support. But reality was I entered the room and he said, hey, why don't you stay in Finland and we start a company together? I wasn't really prepared for this at all. I was rather surprised. And of course, back then I had no clue what this means to start a company. I've never been in touch with venture capital or entrepreneurs. Usually in physics, you're quite far away from these. So actually, back then I thought it's going to be a research project on steroids. So instead of getting a few $100,000 as a research grant as a scientist, I would get some tens of millions to do the same thing, and everything is going to be great. But of course, reality then turned out to be quite different. But this is really how it started. So I entered the room thinking I would apply for a junior professor somewhere. I left the room being the designated CEO of the new company. So this was really being thrown into the cold waters.
Okay, but did you make the decision at that instant, or was it like a longer process to accept the offer?
It wasn't a longer process, but at that time, my partner, now wife, she still lived in Munich. So we had this kind of long-distance relationship already for a couple of years. And of course, for her, until then, the story was, okay, I'm going to do a postdoc there, and then I'm going to be probably somewhere else, maybe even back in Munich. So I called her and said, hey, what do you think if I stay in Finland for a couple of new years and we start a company? And I mean, I think I'm very lucky and, of course, very thankful and happy that she has been always very supportive of my ideas. And she immediately said, yeah, that's a great idea, and why don't you do this? And now she lives with me here in Finland, but we still continued then for a while with this long-distance relationship. But after that was clear, my gut feeling immediately told me it's the right way to do, and I really wanted to explore what is behind all of this entrepreneurship, deep tech, venture capital.
Let's jump to the IQM and your role in it. Please tell what is quantum computing and what does IQM do?
So quantum computing is a complete new way of computing. We all know conceptually how a computer works. So you have a device and you have a kind of a problem that you program into the device, and then you wait for some time and then the answer comes back. This is the fundamental working principle of a computer. And a quantum computer in principle works the same way. You have an algorithm, you program it into a device, and you wait some time and then the answer comes back. The difference is the word quantum in there. So the processor, the logic, is not the same that we use in our normal computers, but it's a logic that follows quantum physics. And in quantum physics, for certain problems, you can actually take huge shortcuts in the algorithms. And these shortcuts allow you to solve problems which we will never be able to solve, even with the biggest supercomputers that we could think of. So one such example is if you want to do molecular design, for example, for drug discovery or material research. If you have larger molecules, then we would need computers that have more transistors than we have atoms in the universe. So it's physically impossible to build such a machine. And there are other problems where we know already today it would take millions of years to get the answer. And for those, actually, quantum computers allow you to find shortcuts to do these calculations in a matter of minutes, maybe. And this means, actually, we can enter a completely new world. We can open doors to fields of research and applications that otherwise they will be kind of stay closed for forever if we just follow the transistor-based computing. So this is the big promise of quantum, and the way it works deep inside the machines is, as I said, we are using principles from quantum physics, such as superposition. So particles, or in our case, electrical circuits, being in two states at the same time. So instead of a transistor, which is either 0 or 1, they can be anything in between. And then this is then what we call a qubit or a quantum bit, which is the quantum version of a transistor. And the clue is that if you have many of those quantum transistors on a chip, what you can do is you can create so-called entanglement. So they share the information. And this really gives you this exponential speed up. The way to think about it for a layman is that if you have a group of people and tell the people they have to solve a complex problem, and everyone starts working by themselves, it will take a long time. But if they could all share all the information all the time that they have in their head, actually, they can solve the problem much more efficiently. And this is in principle the way that the quantum processors work. So they share all the information all the time, and this allows you to take these shortcuts in the algorithms. And the fascinating part is that it works. Technology has developed. It didn't come overnight. Actually, this year we celebrate 100 years of quantum mechanics by the United Nations. So you see it's a very long kind of scientific journey that's behind this, and the technology has been maturing over time. But nowadays we have a chip factory here in Finland where we produce these chips on silicon wafers, really in the very same way as in the semiconductor industry. And we are building many computers per year that we sell out. So it's really a maturity level now of the technology that allows you to create a business out of it.
I understand that IQM has shipped the most computers in the world in quantum computing.
That's correct. Of course, it's a technology and an industry that is highly competitive. So you find very big names there in the US, all the big tech giants like Google, IBM, AWS. In Japan, you have Fujitsu, for example. So really strong names. You have startups that have raised billions of dollars. So this means we are not alone, and we need also to find our way to grow the company. And what has happened is that in the US, people have focused a lot on the cloud business model because it was traditionally there, and especially in the investor scene, people thought that cloud is the way to scale businesses. But the truth is, if a technology is not yet very mature, you need to find early customers that are forgiving, that are co-developing together with you. And this is why we chose a different path. And we said, okay, we also have a cloud offering, but actually the core of the business is really selling quantum computers to big data centers, computing centers, and work with those customers together. So we have been pioneering this new business model for quantum computing, and this now leads to the fact, yes, that we are the company globally that has sold most quantum computers.
I was in South by Southwest in spring 2025, and there was a lecture by Karina Cho, Google Quantum AI COO, and she put it nicely why the quantum computers are so effective on real-world problems. She said that the zeros and ones are way too simple way of representing the real-world stuff. But because quantum is really a representation of the real world, that is the reason why it's easy for quantum computers to solve these very big problems that the current supercomputers can't even think of solving.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think the birth of quantum computing, at least to me, was a sentence by a Nobel Prize winner, Richard Feynman. And he said the sentence that nature is too complex, damn it, because it's quantum mechanical. So to simulate nature, we better use a system that's also quantum mechanical. So it's exactly this idea. We map the problem to a machine that follows the same rules. And this is exactly where it comes from. And these were the first ideas. But the interesting thing is that the applications are not limited to just doing these kind of molecular simulations, biology and physics, because it was shown then that you can build a universal computer out of it. And this means you can, in principle, run any algorithm. The question is, are they all very efficient? But what happened in 1994 is that a guy called Peter Shaw invented an algorithm that's named after him. And this algorithm can be used for code breaking. And of course, this then triggered a lot of government funding, especially in the US, because it was clear that whoever has such a machine first will have a huge advantage, especially in this kind of US-China race. So the US have been funding very systematically since the 90s quantum computing, first on the academic side. And then, as said, around 2015, when Google announced that they would build their own quantum computers, the whole venture capital scene woke up and said, oh, if Google does it, there must be something behind it. So they were starting to fund all of these spin-outs.
I think this is a good segue to your funding rounds as well. You have made 4 rounds, total of 600 million euros, both equity and also some grants and other financing. And it seems that you are one of the most funded quantum computer companies in the world. IQM was founded in 2018, and basically straight from the start you got the first round, which was in spring 2019, and that was the seed round of 11.5 million euros. I think it's fair to say that quantum computers are hard to grasp for most of the people. And investors don't invest in anything that they don't understand. Another thing is that investors, they don't invest in technologies, but they invest in businesses. And I don't think it was clear for investors how the business will play out in quantum computing. Secondly, the round that you made was very, very big, still is. So I'm curious, how did the round came to be? You were a researcher and your co-founder was a professor. Where did you start? Where did you find the investors?
Yeah, that's a good point. And as said, I didn't have any touch points to investors or VCs back then. Mikko actually had already a little bit done some preparation, and he talked to the university how the spin-out could happen and all of this. But it was clear that we need help. We didn't have the network ourselves. And we knew some entrepreneurs from the UK. They have been building companies in the past, and actually they have also started a quantum company. And these guys came and visited us end of 2018. and they said, look, there is a company in the UK, a quantum company, they just raised 50 million. So it should be easy for you to raise a similar amount. And we thought, wow, that's great. So we're going to raise a similar amount. It turned out in the end, actually, they were wrong by a zero. They only raised 5 million in the UK, this company. But anyway, so this is how this ambition level was set, because we thought, okay, if they're going to do it, and as said in the US, they were also already big fundraisers. So we thought, okay, we also are going to do it. So it was clear we wanted to do something big. We got help from these entrepreneurs. They basically introduced us to the venture capitalist. And then the way it went was that it wasn't easy, but let's say we managed to convince Finnish investors, because it was clear that if this whole thing works, it's going to be big. Some people back then said, okay, it could be a second Nokia or something like this for Finland. So we got the support from Finnish VCs and also Tessie. You mentioned also some public money, and we are very thankful for this. But they said, okay, this is going to be a big thing, and we can't do it just like a Finnish thing. So we only give you the money if you either bring some US investors or some investors from Central Europe. So this was then our task, and given my kind of connection that I still had in Munich, I then spent quite some time in Munich doing fundraising there with the Munich VC base. And we managed then to get a consortium together out of Finnish and Munich-based investors. But as you said, the story was not about business so much, but it's also not, let's say, clear venture capital case. It's what people call deep tech, and there are, of course, specific investors for deep tech, so they accept the technology risk, and they accept that their timelines can be 7 years, 10 years, or longer, because they know the uptick can be so big, because we are building new industries. It's a new category of things. So this was the story. It was really, okay, we have a great team. We had actually good technology and IP that came out of Aalto and VTT, and we had a very strong vision. So we said, we're going to be the European quantum computing company that's kind of is there globally, and we're going to be able to compete with all the big names. And I think this is the vision that the deep tech VCs are looking for. And this is how we got started, really just with a kind of piece of paper and a pen and a big vision.
And I think that really sounds like what really is in the sweet spot of VC investing, except for the long time it takes to really build a business, as you said, but all the others, the big market, the dominant positions and so forth. But how did you manage to convince them that you had the right technology, that you had the right team?
Yeah, and this is really, I think, the ecosystem here in Finland when it comes to quantum computing. Of course, now it's even bigger than compared to back then, and many new startups have been formed since then, which is great. But back then already, there was very strong research at Aalto University, and there was lots of infrastructure at VTT, and there still is, and we are expanding this. So this is really what convinced the investors. So of course then they came for the due diligence, and we could show them our labs at the university and all the infrastructure that's there. We could show them the chip fabrication within VTT. So they saw, okay, there is something real, and we had already, of course, chips working on the university side. So we didn't kind of start from scratch in this way, and we did the technology transfer. So this was really, I think, think one of the key arguments was the support network. And Aalto and VTT played a major role, of course, also in convincing the investors. And still today, we are collaborating very heavily with them. So it's not that we as a company do everything ourselves. We actually are a very strong ecosystem partner. And I think this was, in the end, in addition to the team and the vision and all of this was a key factor to show that we are not going to do this alone, but there is actually the backing from those institutions. And I think also the commitment by Tessie and, let's say, the Finnish state in the end was very helpful, because it was clear that if the government backs something like this de-risks the business. And this is what we still see. I think nowadays there's a very strong quantum strategy in Finland, and Finland is really punching above its weight when it comes to quantum. I mean, just as one example, when President Stubb was in the White House some weeks ago to talk about his icebreaker deals, they actually also talked about quantum computing with the US president. So this is the kind of level that Finland has reached. And I think it all started with this vision of course, a few institutions like Aalto, VTT, and the Finnish government back then.
So it seems that Finland was the right place to start the company. But my second question is that how did you convince the investors that this is the right time? Why now? Why invest now?
Yeah, so I said at that time there were already others like Google, IBM, and a few startups. And actually what happened coincidentally was that Google announced in 2019 what they called quantum supremacy. So they had a quantum computer already in the lab that could do calculations that you could not do with any big supercomputer on this planet. And I think this showed investors, A, the technology works in principle, and we had a very credible path to build similar machines. And it showed that it's not a scientific thing, because these big names actually were getting in there. And then if you accept that the thesis is it's not going to be a winner-takes-it-all game, but there are going to be a few dominant players, actually the story works pretty well. You say, okay, look, IBM, Google, they're already doing this. We have technology that's not so far away. We have a very credible path. We have a great team. So we are going to be one of those big players in these big markets. So I think it was this combination of having our own story, which is quite strong, but also showing that the technology actually works and the big names are already in it. So we have to do something. So this created the kind of sense of urgency, or the fear of missing out often it is what drives the early stage investors.
There was Maki VC and Open Ocean from Finland joining the seed round. And I remember at that time in 2019, after the investment was announced, that there was other investors who were thinking that this was really a reckless move from these two VCs, because this was of course completely new area of business and the round was so large. And when I have been discussing with other founders in Finland, many times the founders think that the investors are not brave enough. When you have a very large vision, when you have a very large business opportunity, which many times is completely new, it seems that the investors in Finland, the VC community, they become afraid of that. They are not willing to back the most ambitious and boldest ideas. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think obviously it was a very bold move by both Maki and Open Ocean back then, but this is exactly what we need, right? We need these bold moves. This is what's missing often in Europe. So of course we are super thankful and super happy that they came in, and they have been very helpful along the journey. In the end, I think it's great that this happened, but yeah, maybe it's not happening often enough. I don't think it's kind of a Finnish thing and limited to Finnish VCs. I hear the same thing when I talk to founders in Germany or France or elsewhere. I think it's more like a European mindset where we often see the risks rather than the opportunities, which is exactly the other way around compared to the US, where people usually only see the opportunities, right? So often when I talk to investors, especially these kind of deep tech investors, they think, okay, but if everything goes wrong, could we still sell the IP or something? Like what will be left if everything goes wrong? So this is the mentality that people go into the deals, which obviously is exactly the wrong way, right? You should think about, if everything goes right, what's actually the upside potential and how big can we make this thing? So I think we still have to do a lot of transformation and mindset shift in the European scene. And of course, this is also kind of within the society, right? It's not only investors. It And also, when I started the companies, many people said, "Oh, are you sure you really want to do this? What happens if this goes wrong? You will be burned for the rest of your life." Like these kind of sentences, which obviously is exactly the other way than people think about it in the US, where people say, "Oh, it's great, you start a company, and if it goes wrong, no matter, you just start a second one and the third one until it goes right." So I think it's really this mindset thing that we have to work on in Europe as a whole. And I think these examples here are great. And we need then also to tell these stories. I think that's also missing in Europe, that we are not the best when it comes to marketing, and also marketing ourselves and telling these stories, saying, look, this is how you can do it. And hopefully then you create followers and other entrepreneurs who are going to repeat similar stories.
So let's switch gears and let's go to the A rounds. You did 2. So basically in the end of 2020, you raised your first Series A round, which was 39 million. And there was also some EIB investment included. And then in the summer of 22, you did another Series A round, which was 128 million euros. I'm curious, what had changed from the first round? Because at that time you only had the pen and paper or presentation and the idea. What was the stage that you had to have in order to raise those 39 million and the 128 million?
Mm. Yeah. In the end, the transition from the seed round then to the A rounds was really then to have a working system, to show that it's not only ideas and maybe a little bit of chips that were working, but to build a complete system. Because it's not only the chip, you need to build everything around it. And the reason why we did 2 rounds for the A is that it's not only deep tech that we are doing, it's also hardware for deep tech, which means we need a lot of capital. I mentioned already, we are running our own chip factory. This is actually what the EIB funded, you mentioned it, and we have an assembly line where we put the computers together. Meanwhile, we have a data center in Munich as well. So a lot of capital needed. And then usually people associate certain milestones with these letters, A round, B round, and whatsoever. And usually after the A round, you should have shown kind of product market fit, something like this, and start scaling it up. And the point was that even though we had our first prototype that we actually very thankfully already sold also to VTT, I think this is a very important aspect of the story, we couldn't yet show this kind of product market fit and having it sold also to other customers. This is why we then said, okay, we do an A2, so we don't transition yet to the B. And what happened between A1 and A2, we showed that we actually could sell then another of those, like let's say a copy of the prototype to another customer, which is then basically going into product mode, right? It's not only more one single prototype, but actually there's a real product with a spec sheet and you say this is what you're going to get as a customer. So this is what happened there, and I already mentioned, I think crucial for all of this has been VTT as a pilot customer. And that's a challenge that we have in Europe, not only for quantum, for let's say deep tech hardware in general, is how to enable these big rounds. It's so hard to create commercial traction. And one way to do it is to use states as anchor customers. They can take the early risk and they help companies to grow the revenues. And we are very thankful, of course, for the Finnish government that they have been taking these early risks. I think without this, it wouldn't have been possible. And the result is that now, and we mentioned this already, we are the company that has sold most of those computers. So there's actually an export. So I think that if you think about it from a taxpayer's money, actually it was very wisely used, because I think there are multiple of those euros now flowing back to Finland. But again, it was this kind of visionary thing also there for politicians. Often people kind of complain about politics, but actually these were very bold moves also from the politician side, that they said, okay, we're going to invest in a way and we are going to take this risk and buy products even though they're not ready yet.
In 60s in Silicon Valley, you had on one street the Stanford University. On the second street, you had the Hewlett-Packards and others, so the customers. And then on the third street, you had the investors, the venture capitalists who were funding these new companies. And it sounds that somehow in quantum computing, the similar kind of situation emerged here in Finland.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of seeing the analogy. And of course, you don't always have to reinvent the wheel, right? There are similarities out there. Also for quantum computing, many people think everything is new, but the semiconductor industry is a very good blueprint for what's going to happen in quantum computing. So also there, people, like the first computers that were sold were not personal computers or laptop computers, right? Actually, the first computers were sold to universities and then mainframes and all of this. So I'm a very strong believer in kind of seeing analogies to what has happened in similar fields already. And if you believe in this, and if you see how Moore's law has been going on for decades now, I think it paints a very positive picture also for the future of quantum computing.
So let's jump to your latest round, the one that you had in September 25, Series B, 275 million. As you mentioned, you already had the commercial traction. You were selling those computers already. But I'm curious, how did you find the lead investor for this latest round? As the size is already almost 300 million, the importance of lead becomes even more important. Many of the investors are lemmings in a way that they want somebody else to do the due diligence and all the rest related to the round. And it really becomes very cumbersome to find the one who's willing to do the hard work and also has the understanding of the company and the business. So how did you find your lead?
Yeah, it's always the biggest challenge, of course, to find the lead investor. And yeah, as you said, I mean, we haven't been selling computers in masses in the way that kind of mobile phones are sold. The number is 19 as of today of quantum computers that we have sold, but it's a good number. And actually, it was clear that you can build a business plan out of this that brings you to profitability. And this opens the door to a complete new class of investors, more institutional investors. And actually, another part to the success story also here in Finland is that we then managed to bring in pension funds. That's actually not possible, for example, in Germany and many other countries. And I think this is going to be a huge success factor also going forward. And we are very thankful also to have Varma and Elo, for example, on the cap table. But of course, these funds, they cannot lead such rounds, right? And this brings then the challenge. Who is going to lead such a round? Because venture capital, the funds are not big enough anymore to lead such rounds. They would maybe have the tech expertise, but the funds are not big enough. And then big financial institutional investors, they are not ready yet from a technology point of view. They don't have the deep understanding. And this is always an issue. And here, actually, again, Tessie played a very big role because they said we can help you on the due diligence side to make big investors feel comfortable with this. And we worked very closely with them and did a lot of due diligence because also the goal was to bring in a US investor. I think we have been managing to attract quite a lot of European capital, but also it was clear that we want to expand into the US, especially from a commercial perspective. It's a huge market, and investors typically can help you with this. So this was the goal, to find a strong US investor who could lead such a round. But it was clear that they probably don't feel comfortable because they don't understand quantum and they don't understand, let's say, Finnish companies so well. So Tessie said, okay, we're going to help you with this and we're going to do a lot of the due diligence work, which we can present to the lead investor. So to take workload and maybe hesitation from there. And then we activated our network in the US and we were actually introduced then to 1011 through our network. This is a fund which is focusing on, let's say, cybersecurity, secure compute, where quantum computing, of course, falls into because of this code breaking, for example, that I mentioned. And they really saw the opportunity here that there is real potential because we have products that are being sold and we haven't sold yet in the US. So they saw this market opportunity that, okay, just being a European leader already brings the business quite far. But if we now open the US market, where basically they as an investor can help, there's a huge upside potential. So this is kind of what convinced them. And yeah, we are super happy now to have them with us. They brought some other larger US institutional investors alongside. So I think it really strengthened the cap table there. And we managed to pull off this round then earlier this year, which we are, of course, very proud of.
Was there many investors willing to take the lead position? Or did you just want to proceed as quickly when the first lead candidate emerged?
Yeah, I mean, usually what happens in these rounds is as soon as there's someone who takes the lead, many others start to follow, of course, and in the end, rounds get oversubscribed and in this kind of thing. But I think as soon as someone also says, I take the lead, everyone says, no, I don't have to do it. So this is often how it ends up. As soon as you then find a lead where everyone agrees that this is a great lead, then you just want to wrap the whole thing up, because typically it has already taken quite a while to find this one lead. So this is what happened in our case. Everyone was, of course, super happy and grateful that 1011 would do it. And we started wrapping it up. But then, of course, many people said, oh, now that they do it, we also want to invest, or we want to invest more, or something like this. So this is usually the dynamics that then happens at the end of these rounds.
Tell me about the process, how you turned 1011 Ventures to be your lead investor. Or did they just take the position in your first meeting with them with no questions asked?
Yeah, I mean, in these rounds, usually it's a process. At least I haven't heard that someone just comes straight ahead and says, okay, you're going to lead this round with this valuation or something. But of course, you have a feeling which investors are more excited about it than others. I mean, usually, of course, also investors are excited in the beginning, but then they still say no in the end. But here we had this feeling that, yeah, they're actually quite interested. And they were talking, like they were telling us the story in their view, and it sounded so good. Of course, you start with initial calls, you pitch the company and all of this, and then you get the feedback, and often then it's a no or very hesitant. But they said, yeah, we are really excited and we want to continue due diligence. And then we thought, okay, this is our opportunity, and basically we said, yeah, anyways, we're coming to the US next week, and shouldn't we just meet? So we organized with a small team to fly over there, and then really met them in person. And I think the chemistry was also there. I think that's also important, because it's a lot about trust, especially when you talk about these sums. It's important that the trust is there. And since COVID, of course, a lot of those processes have been done by Zoom, but I still believe that sitting together in one room and creating this trust and having a dinner afterwards and having some fun is very important. So this is what we did, and we spent 2 days with them, and then it was clear they were gonna lead the round. And of course, then you still need to go through the process of proper due diligence and all of this.
When you had the lead in place and you had to design the investor mix, because always with the investors, there's different kind of properties that some bring in capital, some bring in credibility, and some bring in like operational opportunities like intros to the customers or even constraints. So how did you end up with this kind of a mix of investors? As you already said, there was some VCs, there was public money, Tesi, there was also the mutual pension funds from Finland, Elo and Varma, the old investors, of course, and some new companies as well investing in. How did you choose the investor mix?
Yeah, I think, of course, always the question is, how can the new investors already make sure that there will be proper financing afterwards, and how can they either continue investing in follow-on rounds if they have deep enough pockets, or how can they activate their network to make sure this is going to happen. And as I said, it was clear we wanted to bring in US investors and start engaging more there. So we picked a few more US investors, but also we thought it's actually good to start engaging more on the corporate side. So actually we brought in Schwarz, which is a big IT data center provider in Germany, and they have the goal to build kind of sovereign European cloud. And I think this fits very nicely with our narrative. We brought in a chip manufacturer from Taiwan, and of course we are doing chip manufacturing, so there are lots of synergies there. So this is kind of how we built up the syndicate, having institutional investors that you mentioned, in addition with strong US names, and then some strategics. And of course it's always great if the existing ones stay in. It shows the conviction, and that's actually super important also. I didn't mention it, but it's super important for convincing the lead. So obviously when we went to the lead investor, we didn't only have the pre-work due diligence done by Tessie, but we also said, look, and our existing investors, they are going to do a big part of the round. So actually it was very de-risked already, the round.
Let's talk about the quantum computer company valuations. There's at least 4 companies listed, as you said already, IonQ, Rigetti, D-Wave Quantum, and Quantum Computing Inc. And if I look at the valuations at the moment in the markets, the valuations are in billions, the sales are in millions, and price per sales are with IonQ, which is the lowest, it's 212. What's your thought on the valuations?
Yeah, I think it's clear that it's very hard to justify these valuations based on revenue or sales numbers. I think right now the market is driven by technology news and by the potential. And it also, I think, has a big influence coming from what happens on the AI side. And you see, for example, that if people like Jensen Huang mentions quantum computing, either in a positive or in a negative way, the stocks react to it more than they would do to earning call announcements. So I think from this perspective, it is clear that the technology is still early stage and people are believing in the big opportunity and they don't so much need the early revenues now to justify this belief. So I think that's very clear from the situation. And of course, for us, what this means is we have a good story to tell because usually in Europe, valuations are not at this level. But then if we go to investors, we can say, look, this is where we are today and this is where these companies are trading. So actually, even if you are invest in us today, there is still the potential for a very nice uptick. So for us, actually, it gives quite a comfortable situation because it shows the market that there are still, let's say, very good investment opportunities in Europe.
As a last question, which are your most important lessons and takeaways for funding rounds?
Well, one thing, it's never done until it's done. There can always be surprises in the last minute. Of course, you don't read them so much in the news, but I think that's important to understand that it's really crucial to push it over the finish line and don't hesitate. Once you have the conviction from someone, make sure you use the momentum and push it through. This is one thing. And the other thing is that it's very much also about the people. You don't realize it so much when it's going well, because if everyone is cheering, it's great. But sometimes, of course, things don't go the way you think they would go, and then it's really important that you have the right people also backing you, because money is always one thing, but then the people who steer it is another thing. So I think if you have the choice, of course, it's always good to also make some due diligence on the people behind.
What an awesome discussion, Jan. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. It was such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, it was great.
Kuuntelit Rahoituskierros-podcastia, jossa founderit paljastavat parhaat oppinsa rahoituksen keräämiseksi sijoittajilta. Mikäli pidit kuulemastasi, tilaa podi, jaa jakso kaverillesi ja tykkää podia alustalla.